Oh, I got it.
All right. So yesterday we covered photosynthesis. We talked about the equation, the formula, talked about its purpose. So today we're going to talk about sort of another chemical process that happens in living things that sort of goes along with photosynthesis. So just to review, photosynthesis, we have light from the sun usually combined with, in this plant cell, causes a chemical reaction between water and carbon dioxide, and that forms two things: glucose, leave it open, and oxygen. And that's photosynthesis. We call the things on the left the reactants and the things on the right the products. This happens in plants and some other living things, happens in the chloroplast. And the ultimate goal of photosynthesis is to produce glucose. And that's what the plant uses as its food molecule. So that's a review of photosynthesis. Another chemical reaction that happens in living things is called respiration. And respiration really happens in just about all living things go through this process. Okay? In this process, we start off with two ingredients, two reactants, and end up with three things. Okay? And so cellular respiration is basically how living things take food molecules and turn them into a useful form of energy that the cell can actually use. And it starts off, its fuel is something familiar. It's glucose. You start with glucose in respiration. C6H12O6, the sugar. It also requires a gas. Does anyone want to guess what gas it needs? Anna?
Oxygen.
Needs oxygen, correct. Okay, so if glucose is there and oxygen, okay, a chemical reaction can take place that produces three things. Now you can guess from the outline, this is a form of what?
Energy.
Yes, but it's not what you're probably going to say. Dan?
ATP.
Okay, good, it is. It's a chemical called ATP. And ATP is a very important molecule for all living things. It stands for adenosine triphosphate.
I don't know what that means.
Doesn't matter. You don't have to know it. Just know ATP. And basically, you think about it like this. In your house, for example, all of your electronics all run on electricity. Your iPod and your computer and your oven and the toaster in your house, they all use the same form of energy, electricity. Well, in a cell, a similar thing is that all the things that happen in a cell that need energy, they use not electricity, but they use this thing called ATP, this molecule. Okay, so ATP is needed in all cells in order for them to stay alive. If a cell doesn't have ATP, it can't survive. It starts to die.
How does the ATP get inside the plant?
Because this happens, this process happens.
Okay.
So it takes glucose, okay, and it combines it with oxygen and makes ATP. It also produces two waste products that probably you can now figure out what they are. What is this one? One of them is carbon dioxide. And Anna?
Water?
Yeah. So how do you guys know those?
Well, I said water. Jesus.
How do you know those?
Oh, second one.
Sid? Yes. Exactly. You could think about respiration is almost the exact opposite of photosynthesis with just one change. So respiration with glucose and oxygen, just like we have it here. It releases a type of energy and water and carbon dioxide. Now the only thing different is the type of energy. Obviously, respiration doesn't produce light. If it did, we would be glowing constantly, and that might be cool, but that wouldn't provide us with any useful energy. So it doesn't produce light as its energy. It helps produce this molecule called ATP. Now, this molecule ATP is the energy the cell runs on. Can you guess which cell organelle respiration happens in? We know photosynthesis happens in chloroplast. Where do you think respiration happens? Jacob?
In nucleus?
No. Joseph?
The stem.
No. Which organelle? We just learned the cell organelles. Anna?
Ribosomes?
They make protein.
Chromosomes?
Are we just saying organelles or are we thinking? Think
Think
about what is happening here. What is respiration release?
Oxygen. No wait.
What is it? The main thing it's releasing?
Water?
The thing that's important.
The
ATP, which is a form of
Energy.
which organelle? Yes. Maggie. No?
Mitochondria.
Yes.
Mitochondria.
Happens in the mitochondria.
I
They release, you know, raise your hand and then call on you. They release energy.
thought you said
So the way they release energy is this process, respiration, is always happening in these mitochondria. In fact, the cells in your body, in tissues that use a lot of energy, like muscle cells, they have a lot of mitochondria in them because in order for those muscle cells to work, they use up lots of energy. So that is cellular respiration. Its ultimate goal is to produce energy, or ATP, for the cell. Happens in the mitochondria and happens in basically all living things. They all have to go through this process. So plants go through photosynthesis and they make glucose. Then they use that glucose down here to make ATP. So plants have to do both. Now humans or other animals, they can't do photosynthesis. So where do we get this glucose? Yeah, in foods that we eat. That's how we supply ourselves with this glucose needed for respiration. What's that? So it's a good question. Sydney asked, what if you don't have glucose? Or another similar question. What if you don't have oxygen? Because if you don't have glucose or if you don't have oxygen, then that cellular respiration can't happen and your cells start to die. It's why if you can't breathe, you can't survive because your cells run out of oxygen. They don't have the energy they need to live and the cells begin to die. No, separate thing. This next slide, you don't have the exact picture, you have something slightly different, but it's just meant to convey to you that this is a cycle in that plants produce, in photosynthesis, make oxygen and glucose. Oxygen and glucose is used by animals. They go through respiration and release carbon dioxide and water, which is used by plants, and this cycle repeats. So what the end products of photosynthesis are the reactants of respiration, so you have this cycle.
We also do the photosynthesis, right?
Not now. All right, any questions about this is also called cellular respiration.